we've found that our creatives that have obscure backgrounds like art history or even history or geography, they're able to ask much better questions of the AI. What we are going to be doing over the coming years is we are creating digital twins of ourselves, and they will be making decisions for you, purchasing decisions for you. So we as marketers not only need to figure out how do we market to human beings, but how do we market to AIs. Human beings and AIs will not just operate within the creative landscape. They're going to push the boundaries. They're going to come with new archetypes. They're going to come up with new story arcs. And that's what's exciting for me about the next decade.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Makes You Wonder. Another episode is here. If this is the first time you're checking us out, I am Oskar. I am the co-founder of Wondercraft, and I have the great pleasure of hosting this project, which is all about the future of human creativity in the age of AI, or I guess we call it age of intelligence nowadays. After that Sam Altman post the other week, I like it. Let's run with it. Really fun to see that more people are tuning in lately, and I'm sure there's a lot of new ones coming in for this one because we have a really, really cool guest on the show. So please do go give us a follow or a review or both. Would certainly much appreciate it. And also, if you want to get in touch with us, go to any of the social media channels, find Wondercraft there. You can shoot us a DM or go to YouTube and comment section. You guys know what to do. It'd be great to hear from you. My guest today is none other than Daniel Hulme. He's a very prominent figure in the field of artificial intelligence, and I was very excited to get him on the show. We have a lot of friends in common. We're a lot of people that I know at WPP agencies, so it's really great to get him on the show. He is very recognized for his work that he's done in artificial intelligence, and he spent most of his career talking and defining what AI is and how companies can apply and build solutions using AI. And he's an entrepreneur, he's an academic, and he's a true thought leader in this space. So it's really fun to have him on today. He's also the CEO of Satalia, which was acquired by WPP 3 years ago. WPP, for anyone who doesn't know, is the world's largest marketing services company out there, a big holding group within the marketing and the communications industry, where Daniel today continues to play a very important role as the chief AI officer across the whole global network. He's also the CEO and co-founder of a company called Conscium, which is the world's first applied AI consciousness research organization. Very, very cool. He's also the co-founder of Faculty. He's a lecturer at Singularity University and an advisor to several technology startups. So we have tons and tons of stuff to go through in this episode. It was a lot of fun. So I'll just let's hit the recording, and here's my chat with Daniel Hulme. Daniel Hulme, welcome to Makes You Wonder. I'm so happy to have you on the show. We just heard an introduction. I do this before or after the episode is shot. So I'll give an introduction to you before this, so everyone knows who you are. But we're going to get to that. And you've accomplished so much in AI that it was almost hard to figure out where to best start this discussion with you today. And I was, I'm also in AI with our company Wondercraft, and I was actually at a conference the other week in Brand Week, which is a conference by Ad Week here in the US, which is in Phoenix, Arizona, which was 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 45 Celsius. It was very tough for a Swede to be out there. But it was very interesting. It's a lot of talk about AI. But the thing that had left me coming out of all those discussions was that I felt like AI is such a beaten up term these days that it's starting to kind of lose its luster a little bit. It's like saying, digital media 10 years ago. Like, what does it mean? And I've heard you talk a lot about the importance of talking about the applications of AI and the definition. So just to start off here, let's settle this. It's October 2024. How do you define AI, and what is the most common kind of misconceptions you hear out there today? I guess I've built an entire career around defining AI and helping organizations understand how to utilize it. My PhD was in intelligence, and so I did really go deep into definitions. And I guess the most popular definition is getting computers to do things that humans can do. And I guess because of the advent of ChatGPT and DALL-E and things, we're able to now get machines to recognize objects in images, to correspond in natural language. And when we get machines to behave like humans, because humans are the most intelligent thing that we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. Now,
there's enough books out there to help humans understand that we are not necessarily good at making certain decisions. We're not good at finding patterns in, above 4 dimensions. We're not good at solving problems beyond 7. Computers can find patterns in thousands of dimensions. They can solve problems with thousands of moving parts. So benchmarking machines against humans, I don't think is a very sensible thing to do. There's a much better definition, I think, that comes from the definition of intelligence. Now, there's quite a lot of definitions of intelligence out there. The one that I really resonate with is goal-directed adaptive behavior. And goal-directed in the sense you're trying to achieve an objective, you're trying to route your vehicles, you're trying to live a happy life, or you're trying to allocate your workforce to maximize utilization, or spend your marketing money to maximize return. Behavior is how quickly and well you can answer that question. But the key word for me in that definition is adaptive, goal-directed adaptive behavior. That systems are able to make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I was being brutally honest, we tend not to see adaptive systems in production. And most systems in production are automation. You give something some data, it makes a decision. You give it the same data tomorrow, it makes the same decision. And the definition of stupidity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. So I think the true paradigm for me is building systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. And the reality is that most organizations are a long, long way from that. And so I find definitions actually not very helpful. I find looking at AI through technology is not very helpful. Over the past decade, I've been applying algorithms, and actually over the past several decades, new advances in algorithms plus data plus compute allow us to do some incredible things. So I'm more interested in using algorithms, that you might call AI, to solving problems across supply chains. And they could be generative algorithms, they could be machine learning algorithms, optimization algorithms, or even task automation.
Right. I like that, because you're focusing more on what is in it. What is the outcome more than the concept of AI, which again, back to my other point, it feels so wide. It's really about the application and what you're trying to do. So the goal is really the center of the definition in your world.
And then ultimately what you'll do is build systems that can safely adapt themselves. But I guess a lot of people get excited about emerging technologies. Like 7 or 8 years ago, it was machine learning, data science. And the impulse is, let's get all of our data together. Let's extract some insights from data and hope that leads to better decisions. And if I'm being honest with you, there's been a massive amount of misinvestment in that hope. And the same thing is going to happen with generative AI, is that people will see them as new shiny technologies, applying them to problems across their supply chain that are not right for those algorithms. And then what they'll do is they'll blame the technology, and there'll be a so-called AI bubble, or so-called AI is overhyped. The reality is that people are just misallocating these technologies to the right problems. And these technologies are phenomenally powerful. And if you understand how to apply them in the right way and build them safely, responsibly, they can be maintained and supported and all of that boring stuff, then it will drive a massive amount of value.
Let's talk about that. We are living in a very media circus around AI, right? And again, talking very widely about the concept of AI. It's a lot of headlines out there around it. And, I think the last earnings call here I think 70% of all Fortune 500 mentioned AI, and the mentions are just like 250% more than the previous quarter. So that gives us a signal that there's a lot of chatter and a lot of noise around it. What do you think are what are the biggest misconceptions out there for big companies when they even talk about AI? Should they talk about AI, or is it, how do you describe this hype we're in, and what is the next phase? Are we getting out of it and starting to talk more about how you actually use it as a way that you describe it to solve problems and figure out how to evolve business operations in different ways? What's your take on the hype cycle we're in right now? I guess
it's a really great question. I guess there are broadly 3 aspects of an organization that people are now applying AI to. The first and probably the most popular aspect is core productivity. How can we use Copilot and Duet and ChatGPT in helping us write faster emails and PowerPoint slides, et cetera, et cetera? Now, everybody will benefit from those core productivity improvements. They're going to allow people to do tasks much more effectively, but it's not going to differentiate your business. So the next layer is, how do I apply AI to solving problems across my supply chain that are going to differentiate my business? And the challenge there is picking the right battles, because you might think, I'm going to use AI to solve this problem, and then in a year's time that will be redundant because there's an AI that already solves it very, very easily. So understanding how to pick your right battles is important. And that's where I think it's important to also have a chief AI officer, somebody that really deeply understands these technologies and understands the trajectory of these technologies. Because, we've got people, as you say, sort of rebranding themselves as AI experts, but again, not knowing how to place the right bets. And then the third question is, how does AI completely disrupt my business? Not just accelerate my transformation, but how does it disrupt my... Now, there are some industries that are relatively immune to disruption. If you're growing things, if you are distributing physical goods in the real world, they are not going to lend themselves to generative AI. They're optimization problems, and you can really only typically move the needle by a few percentage points. Industries like media, marketing, communication are being completely disrupted by AI, where instead of it taking weeks to create an ad, it now takes seconds to create an ad. So I've been tasked, as well as the CTO and others, by the CEO of WPP to not just figure out how do we accelerate our transformation, but how do we disrupt not just WPP, but disrupt the entire industry, which is a different kind of perspective. And I think there are actually four things that differentiate a company right now. I don't think it's technology. Okay, I think technology has been around for a long, long time. And I think the first is data. If you have data that contains signals that are different and better than your competitors, it's ultimately the data that makes AI smart, and smarter AI is a smarter organization. The second is AI talent. Again, we're seeing people that are dabbling with AI, that are building models, but every company is doing that. And the only way I think that you will differentiate is by having differentiated talent. I'd like to think that, I run Satalia, which was acquired by WPP 3 years ago. Satalia is like a deep mind. And I think there's only a handful of deep minds that really do exist around the world. So the question is, can you engage with deep AI talent that will differentiate, that will innovate your organization? And most organizations can't. They think that they can. They think that, they're being egged on by consultants saying, we'll help you build this yourself. And you'll end up being left with technology that you can't support, that you don't understand, that you don't then have the talent to maintain, because they've left after 2 or 3 years. So being honest in terms of your ability to attract and retain and motivate AI talent is the second differentiator. The third differentiator, I think, is leadership. And I spend a lot of my time engaging with C-suites, helping them understand, not to get seduced by the hype, but how to understand how to pragmatically start to bring in AI in their organizations that's going to drive value from the start, and not just hope that it's going to drive value. And I guess the fourth differentiator is purpose. I think, talent wants to work with organizations that have a strong purpose. And it's not just good enough for organizations to have that strong, profitable business. And so surfacing your purpose, showing that you can live your purpose, and that purpose is somehow making some sort of positive impact on society, I think is also important.
Incredible. I mean, a few things there that I'm interested in. So you said, first of all, data being the first thing to look at. I got in a discussion the other week with someone in the industry about who AI is really contributing to the most at the moment, and he argued that AI can actually be better leveraged by the incumbents in many industries that sits with most of the data, right? If that is the biggest thing that is the game changer for businesses to evolve and really disrupt an industry. Are we changing the narrative on that? Because it's usually, innovators' dilemma is about bigger corporations, bigger companies, and the incumbents being challenged by startups who are more nimble, faster, and be able to solve problems in a different way. But what's your take on that? Like, is this better for the incumbents, or does it provide opportunities to even disrupt industries for new startups as well?
I do think data is a disruptor, and I think organizations that have differentiated data sources are going to become very valuable. One of the things in WPP, for example, we're in the business of understanding perception, and we build what we call audience brains that recreate how people think and feel about things that are presented to them. And understanding the data you need to build a representative audience is actually very much an art. If we know how somebody is going to perceive something and why, that's a very powerful insight. That said, I think there is an impulse to say, let's get all of our data together and hope that it's going to drive value. And you find that actually you don't need to have a huge amount of data. to be differentiated. You just need to have the right data that contains the right insights. And what I've found historically when building AI solutions is that there are usually human beings that already know the answer. They already know what data contains insights. And, the example I always use is that we were approached many years ago by a low-cost airline. And that low-cost airline said, Daniel, look, we're collecting where people are clicking on our website. We collect their purchase history. We know the name of their dog, what they're going to have for dinner. What we want to do, what we want to do is we want to predict if they're going to churn, if they're going to go and buy from another low-cost airline. And I said, well, why do you churn? Why do you go and buy from somebody else? And they said, price. And I said, are you collecting your competitor pricing? And they said, no. If you're not collecting the data that contains a signal, then you're wasting your time. So typically human beings already know the data sources, and I would always start there and then start to identify other data sources that could contain more interesting insights.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, that makes total sense to me, but it's still like, look at all these big LLMs out there, and they are, trained on a massive amounts of data now, right? Isn't that data quite available to startups as well for the non-incumbents and the challenges in many markets to be able to disrupt?
It is, yeah, and it's fantastic. Like, not only is the data available through these large language models. Now, as we know, most of those large language models are trained on the kind of corpus of information that's available on the internet. So in theory, you could access that data anyway. It's just that the large language models provide you with this fantastic interface to be able to get that data in smart ways. So yes, I mean, not only does it allow you to access the data through these interfaces, but as we know, it allows you to create apps and code and all of those things. So I think the large language models are phenomenally powerful for many, many reasons, and I think that they are going to spawn a Cambrian explosion of new innovations.
We're going to get back to that because I find it really interesting. And I love how you describe these brand brains and audience brains. I think that's a very kind of approachable description of that people can get their head around quite easily. And I really like that concept. We're going to get back to that. I want to ask you, like, what, talking about applied AI, how do you use it in your everyday? How does that, Daniel Hulme, how do you use AI? What app is on your phone that you pick up? Do you have your action button set to ChatGPT? Is it Copilot? Is it WPP?
It's going to be very embarrassing, but I am one of the least users of AI. Not because I don't find it useful. I think it's incredibly powerful. But in some respects, my job is to figure out the future. And what AI can currently tell you is what's happening now and in the past. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to absorb other things rather than what AI tells me, to try and think about how the trajectory of AI is going to develop, et cetera, et cetera. So I spend a lot of my time thinking rather than speaking to AI. Probably I should speak to AI. But if I'm honest, I, like many people, I'm very interested in health. I'm all AI'd up in terms of monitoring myself and all my devices just tell me that I don't sleep enough, I don't eat enough, and I don't exercise enough. I'd like to one day have a device that's actually going to make me go and exercise and eat better. That's what I'm hoping for. But I guess in some respects AI is embedded all over the place, and once we get AI to the point where it's able to do actions for you, you ask it to do something, it goes and does something for you. I think again we're going to see a step change in usage. At the moment, it just gives you information for you then to have to kind of absorb and make decisions from. But I want AIs to be going out there doing stuff.
Yeah, interesting. So what was your sleep score this morning when you woke up? What's
I don't know.
Like on a Friday?
My sleep scores
are...
are
ring there. So
I've got the problem is I spend most of my time on aeroplanes, and so my apps really have just given up altogether on trying to advise me what to do.
It's kind of depressing after a while if you travel too much. You see how you're impacted by it.
Exactly.
But let's get into that. I mean, you are a very busy person, and we just talked about how I won't compare you to another person quite prominent in the AI space, Mr. Musk, who balances a lot of different companies. It seems like you do the same thing. You're currently the co-founder and CEO of Conscium, the world's first applied AI consciousness research organization, if I understand that correctly. You're the CEO of Satalia, an AI consulting professional services firm, I guess, that was acquired, as you said, by WPP 3 years ago. And you are now the chief AI officer for WPP. How do you manage your time between these companies? I'm sure the Aura Ring or your devices help you in some regard, but talk to us about that.
I also entrepreneur in
Oh, you
most
do more
these
things.
sales, I do a lot of public speaking about AI. I'm not saying that just because I'm trying to show off. Well, very fortunately, they're all kind of linked together, so they all kind of benefit each other. My day job is making sure that we are executing on our AI strategy in WPP, and I've got an incredible team to make sure that we're doing that. And then, part of my other job is to make sure that we're disrupting ourselves, which is my CEO of Satalia hat, making sure that we are pushing the boundaries in building technologies for marketing, media, communication. And again, I rely on an incredible team to ensure that that's being driven. I have started Consium, and Consium is very much linked to all of these other things. Consium, the consciousness company, is an AI safety company leveraging new emerging technologies, neuromorphic technologies, that will allow us to build safe and efficient AIs. And and the public speaking, I'm an external thinker. It's going to sound a bit strange, but most people have like an inner monologue. They've got a voice chattering away in their head. I don't know whether you have, but most people have got either one or many voices. There are some people that don't have any voice. My head's empty, completely empty. And so I'm an external thinker. So I like to go and do talks and have that dialogue happening with the crowds, because that also helps me think. Because all of these things are actually tied together. I used to say I borrow time from the future, and like in the same way that governments borrow money from the future. But I'm very, very fortunate that I've got a very good balance. And if I'm honest with you, I don't really do anything beyond that other than look after my two children. I don't really have any hobbies or friends or anything like that. So I do AI in my family.
Well, that was a healthy answer. I feel happy that you're not stretched too thin and you can spend family time what really matters. That's good. And I understand that there's a lot of overlap. And I like the fact that, Consium seems like it's, at least on paper, correct me if I'm wrong here, it feels like a bit of a countermeasure to what you're doing with WPP and pushing the limits on commercial use of AI and how to, in a very capitalist, free market, how companies can grow. And on the other side, you find Consium kind of, is that how we should read it? Or is that why you started Consium?
It is. Consium is a commercial organization. And I have to say, over the years, I've really understood and appreciated the power of the free market. I think, obviously there are challenges with it. And, for us, there are some things where having a more centralized model of distributing resources makes more sense. In fact, actually, there are parallels in terms of algorithms. There are algorithms where if you have perfect knowledge, having a central authority distributing and optimizing resources based on that personal knowledge, that perfect knowledge, is a better algorithm than if you had some sort of what are called a multi-agent system, where you don't have perfect knowledge, where each of us have different perspectives, and that's actually typically a more effective way of distributing resources. So I think the balance is really great. My day job is implementing and optimizing the end-to-end marketing stack. It's figuring out how to disrupt an industry. I'm really passionate about applying AI to removing inefficiencies across any industry as well. So that keeps me honest. And whilst Consium is a commercial organization, it's grounded in AI safety. What we want to do is we want to ultimately build AIs that are safe for humans, but also safe for AIs, that we do run the risk over the coming decade to either start attributing consciousness to machines that are not conscious, which I don't think is a big problem. It might cause some social issues, but we also run the risk of what Nick Bostrom calls mind crime, where we build AIs that might actually be conscious, and might not realize they're in difficult, torturous, anxious situations. So Consium's goal is to figure out how do we identify behavioral markers for consciousness, how do we identify behavioral markers for suffering, how do we identify behavioral markers for moral systems, and then how do we provide the tooling and technologies for people to build AIs, but make sure that those AIs are being verified, that they're not in pain or violating some sort of moral system. So we do think that neuromorphic technologies, these new emerging technologies that are coming out of academia, could have a massive positive impact on the world. So these neuromorphic technologies are significantly more energy efficient than large language models. They learn very quickly. I believe they're going to kind of spawn the sort of robotic revolution where we're going to have embodied AIs in the real world, which could bring a massive amount of value. But at the same time, it does raise a lot of challenges and risks to human beings and also to AIs. So Contium is really leaning in to making sure that we're building AIs that are safe for us and for them, with the expectation that these technologies will make human beings flourish.
Amazing. So it's still a for-profit company. What is the ideal customer for Contium? Who do you work with? Is it governments and brands?
It's very much a research organization. So I guess when I pitched this to WPP, I said, look, I want to do this. I want to scratch this itch, which is I want to invest some money into building a research organization that's leaning into this question of building towards safe, conscious machines. And I said, look, it won't distract me from my day job. It's going to burn loads of money. There's no target market. There's no business plan. And WP, much to my respect for them, said, look, we really back you, Daniel. We really think that you're onto something, and we want to invest. So WPP have actually supported me in building Contium without actually having any necessary view of a commercial return. That said, we really think that neuromorphic technologies and providing people access to these neuromorphic technologies, as well as giving people the tools to verify and build safe AIs, could be incredibly valuable. What that route is right now, we're still working on, but I think that these technologies are going to be the next generation of AI.
Oh, super interesting, and I can see why they back you on that. That's probably a very smart move. And tell us, for us, speaking for a friend here, tell us what neuromorphic technologies really mean.
So neuromorphic technologies are really inspired on how our brains work. I know large language models are often referred to as neural networks, but the fact is that those large language models are very big and they propagate numbers. And when they require a lot of data to learn, you have to show it lots of images of oranges, for example, for it to build a statistical representation of an orange. And the reason why GPUs have become so popular is because GPUs are really good at multiplying and adding all of these numbers together. And our brains operate actually on the power of a light bulb, and we learn very, very, very quickly. I have to show you something once before you know what it is. And so our brains spike, our neurons spike, and instead of propagating numbers. And those spikes, how I understand it, is they can contain many more degrees of freedom to capture more information. So the frequency of the spikes, how many spikes there are, the gaps between them, all of this allows for multiple degrees of freedom. So it means you can encapsulate much more information in a much smaller model. And the fact is, again, these brains remember things. So if I show it lots of pictures of oranges, it actually remembers all of those pictures of oranges, and it also generalizes what an orange is. So it learns very, very, very quickly. So neuromorphic computing essentially are much more biologically inspired brains. They are significantly more energy efficient and more adaptable, and the latency is also very fast.
That's incredible. So, I mean, that's a huge problem, right? The energy drain on AI compute is a hot topic, of course, and an implication on the environment and all such things. So, is this something that is generally adopted now, or is it in production? What have you seen the implication of the positives, upside of this being more efficient?
So if you Google neuromorphic computing, IBM, Intel have been playing with these technologies for many, many years. In fact, Intel has just released Loki, which is a neuromorphic offering. I help spin out companies from universities, and I often say to people, there's a big difference between research and technology, and there's an even bigger difference between technology and a business. And what we're starting to see now is these technologies, these neuromorphic technologies, starting to become businesses. So there's a handful of startups that have now appeared that are providing both the hardware for spiking neural networks or neuromorphics, and also the software. And their target markets are things like drones and simple robots, cars even. There's some car companies that have started to dabble in neuromorphics because of the energy efficiencies. So we're getting to the point where it's moving from technology to business. Those companies have investment. And as I said, I think that that will do is it will spawn the sort of robotic revolution. And when robots start to engage with the world and they start to realize that that's its arm and it looks in the mirror and that's it, we end up having a situation where you might have sentience or self-awareness, which then could become conscious.
Incredible. Then you advise a lot of companies. Is that in this space as well, I'm assuming?
I do. And my typical advice is get more advice. But I get to invest in companies and things like that now, which is great fun. But yeah, I ultimately, I'm really excited about the impact that technology will have on society. I want to support as many people as possible that want to make the world better from the use of these technologies.
Fantastic. Yeah, for any of my VC friends listening, go and look at the companies Daniel is advising. Maybe you can find something good there if they need more funding. Anyway, I want to dive in a little bit more into the kind of creative industry that you now find yourself in, because I understand that Satalia is not specifically wasn't in the brand and communication industry, really, if I understand it correctly. I mean, you probably spanned it as well in the scope of work that you did with companies around the world. But what's your experience so far working with global brands in media, marketing, and communications the past 3 years? What has been the most kind of eye-catching learning that you've had from the experience at WPP?
Yeah, by the way, it's a great insight. So well done for picking up on that. Not many people do realize that we didn't have any marketing or media background before joining WPP. There were really 5 reasons why we joined WPP. The first is that we have solved lots of problems across supply chains. So last mile delivery, middle mile delivery, warehouse management, but primarily applying optimization algorithms to solving those problems in a differentiated way. And WPP have an opco called VML, which has, they build websites and e-commerce solutions. And the idea was that was a channel for these products that we have to then augment marketing. So if you've got a website where you're selling goods and you have your own fleet, then we have now software that allows you to optimize those fleets much more effectively. The second reason was I'm really passionate about workforce, how we can allocate people in a way that enhances their creativity. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment. And of course, WPP is often regarded as the most creative company in the world, and being able to apply AI to enhancing that creativity is really exciting. The third reason is that we are really good at understanding how to optimize supply chains, and WPP have a supply chain of content creation and all that kind of stuff, and pushing out across channels. So how can we apply algorithms to optimize end-to-end marketing? They of course touch every brand pretty much in the world, and there's an opportunity here for me to take AI to those brands, solving things way beyond marketing. And finally, they've got an incredible platform for me to kind of share and do my thought leadership. So how do we make sure that we're building safe AIs, not just for this industry, but for all industries? And so it's been an incredible journey. It's been an overwhelming success. I love the organization, and I'm really excited that AI happened whilst we were there, which means that we now have an opportunity to disrupt an entire industry. It's very rare, I think, you get the chance to do that. And that's what we're doing in WPP. Amazing.
I mean, yeah, just looking past the 3 years, everything has happened past 3 years. Like, it's really exponentially skyrocketed the mainstream consciousness around AI and the discussion around it. And obviously in agencies, in WPP has, is a massive holding company with so many industries. You touched it a little bit on it before. You mentioned it. What is the AI strategy at WPP, and how do they kind of get that out to all their agencies and in so many different aspects of marketing communication? I guess it's PR firms, production studios, to creative agencies, etc. So yeah, what is the strategy, and how do you kind of get your message out to them?
Yeah, well, if you look at our supply chain, there were broadly, I don't know, let's say there are 7 core things that happen across our supply chain, of which a handful of those have been we've been applying AI to for a long time. So, for example, performance prediction. If I want to predict the performance of an ad, clicks, likes, sales, comments, etc., there are already methodologies, algorithms, data to allow you to do that. Then, once you predict performance, how do you then push that content across channels to maximize return on investment? And of course, that infrastructure is already there. The bottleneck historically has been content creation. How do we create campaigns, test them against audiences to see how they think and feel about them before we create the ads, and then predict performance and push it across channels. Generative AI has now unlocked our ability to create content and to create synthetic audiences to test that content against. So what generative AI has done is it essentially has unlocked our ability to optimize our supply chain. We're also using AI for creativity, and I can talk about that later on. We use machine learning and AI to identify segments. And let's imagine that we built a system which we call Open. WPP Open is the end-to-end platform that we're using inside WPP. So there's tens of thousands of people using this platform ready to do marketing, and it's being used by some of the biggest brands in the world. So we've built an end-to-end marketing platform that is now being licensed by the biggest brands in the world. And let's imagine that we solved end-to-end marketing. Anybody essentially has access to these technologies. Well, first of all, one of the bottlenecks then is how to identify the macro and micro moments that are going on around the world to build campaigns around. So I would argue, there are millions of moments today that are being missed where we could be building ads or campaigns to capture that moment. There might be, a typhoon in India right now that we could be capitalizing on in some respects. Now, again, let's assume that we're able to identify moments and create content for those moments and push it across the right channels. I would argue the only differentiator then is human creativity. It's coming up with crazy ideas that differentiates one brand to another. And that's really what I'm excited about sinking my teeth into, is how can we enhance, accelerate creativity, not just in media marketing and communication, but how do we do that for every human on the planet?
Oh, I love that. I love that, Daniel, because that's the world that I've lived in is just that. And I think now with AI and what we're doing at Wondercraft really resonates with me. What we're trying to do is a very niche part of what you're doing in just audio, because that hasn't been available before for brands and creative teams to be able to produce audio at the kind of the speed of culture, right? That is now so available in social media and other really fast media channels when you can create, come up with ideas and push something out on a channel at the flick of a button. Basically, if you're watching the Emmys and want to pounce on some sort of meme coming out of that, you can. We're trying to solve that for the audio channel and starting out there. And I find that really interesting. But what you just said about creativity is the core of how I view it as well, and what we talk about every single day. How do we enhance that human creativity, not in actual production of things, but really how do we get people to sketch, in our case, in audio, or be able to explore their creative ideas using AI as a friend, an assistant to really do that. So what is your stance on that currently at WPP? Or let me ask you this: what's the most kind of surprising way AI has enhanced human creativity as you've seen it at WPP?
Yeah, there are at least two answers to this. One is we've found that our creatives that have obscure backgrounds like art history or even history or geography or philosophy or, photography, lighting, aperture, camera angles, they're able to ask much better questions of the AI. So the AI will know about some obscure time in history or some artists that's in some corner of the world that I will not know about. But the creatives that do know about them, they're able to surface those answers much more effectively than somebody like me. So having this kind of broad knowledge actually is a bit of a superpower, because it means you can ask better questions of AI. So that's been firstly interesting. And the second is, how can we get AI to explore the creative landscape first? And so I had this hypothesis several years ago that creatives tend to use archetypes or templates to ideate. So maybe an archetype is inversion. If I apply the concept of inversion to automotive, then maybe somebody might come up with the rubbish ad, which is a car choosing you instead of you choosing the car, because the car cares about its brand, right? That's inversion. If I apply inversion to cat food, it might not make any sense. But maybe another example is extreme. So if I apply extreme to Red Bull, well, what's Red Bull? It's extreme sports, it's flying, it's wings. What's extreme space? Let's get somebody to jump out of a spaceship, right? You can imagine that by applying these archetypes, I think there are, let's say, 50 of them, to products, then it will help you explore parts of this landscape. Now, you have archetypes, you have story arcs, you've got, from enemy to lover, you've got all these different types of story arcs, you've got different types of media, billboards, Super Bowl ads, different types of media, you've got different types of audiences. And when you start to multiply these different dimensions together, you get literally an idea space of millions of possible ideas. Now, of course, many of those ideas will be rubbish and not interesting. But human beings, I think, probably navigate a small portion of that space. And I think what creatives do is they are able to navigate that space effectively well. So what we're doing in WPP is we're trying to encode that creative genius with the ability to explore this creative landscape to come up with ideas that could be effective.
I love that. But so here's a follow-up question to that. Do you think, and you spend your time thinking about the future, is there a time when AI and creativity, I mean, AI is now a reflection of the data it's trained on, right? But you can see here, where you're trying to create new patterns by asking the right questions and doing these. Do you think that, do you believe that AI system could ever develop the creativity that feels spontaneous and that better serves us up? Or do we always going to have a human component to it, the human chaotic creative genius behind selecting the right creative or curating it?
I think there will always be humans. Yes, I think that I think I asked myself two questions, and I know that creativity is much more of a spectrum than these two things. But the first question is, how do I create a Monet versus how do I create Monet? And a Monet is me training a large language model on all of the kind of Monets. What is it? Post-impressionism. I can't remember the type of art, but anyway, on loads of
we'll fix that in post-production.
Whatever. You make me look smart, please. So you train it on lots of types of Monets, and you say now, create an image of a tiger drinking a cup of tea at a Monet, and it's able to do that, and that has never existed before. And I would argue that is creative in some respect. I think what Monet did, and it's hard to channel my inner Monet, and I'm definitely not an artist, is that he probably had an appreciation of different genres, and rather than operating within one genre, and the zeitgeist of what was going on at the time and what all the cultural issues, he was able to somehow project and enter a new genre, a new space. I think whatever it is, post-impressionism.
I can confirm, Daniel, that it's actually impressionism.
Impressionism. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Yeah. I was close, half right. And so I think we can get AIs now to create a Monet. Whether AIs can come up with or identify new emerging genres, so my AI camera likes to zoom in and zoom out randomly, then it is a different question. I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is if we understood the data that Monet used, maybe he wasn't even conscious of it, but maybe it was an unconscious impulse. If we understood the data that allowed him to kind of enter that new part of the search space, I think we can probably get AIs to do it. But I think that's what's exciting. Human beings and AIs will not just operate within the creative landscape. They're going to push the boundaries. They're going to come with new archetypes. They're going to come up with new story arcs. And that's what's exciting for me about the next decade, is that we are going to push the boundaries of creativity and come up with crazy stuff that's just going to inspire people.
That's fun. It's a very, I like the idea of that too, pushing boundaries on both directions, right? Because I think that's what we see. And what you're bringing up now always tends to bring me into a very philosophical question. What is art? Does it have to come from the deep human pain and suffering that we've seen throughout history? In how we view the world, right? It's a very personal approach. Go to MoMA here in New York, and you see modern art that's pushing the boundaries. But it's the interesting part is really the story behind the artist creating it, and can that be replicated through a computer or AI? Do we feel the same way about it? So it becomes a lot about the human perception of the art piece itself.
I have probably a heathen view of art, which I'm definitely, if I was living in a world where people threw tomatoes at me, I'm sure this would happen. So I'm definitely going to be beaten up by this. But my sort of view of whether art is good or not is, if I'm an artist that is trying to elicit an emotion or a story or a feeling or whatever in myself or others, is that if they create something, let's say, I don't know, a sculpture or an image, if you then showed that to 1,000 educated, I'm not talking about educated as in schooling, but people that knew about that subject, and they felt and what the artist wanted them to feel, then I would argue that that's good art. Now, the example that I like to use is that there's a painting called the Death of Socrates. I think it's actually in the Metro. It's one of my favorite paintings, and actually at the time, I think multiple paintings were commissioned to represent the death of Socrates. Now, if you haven't ever read The Death of Socrates, Plato, then you probably look at this piece of art and be like, oh yeah, there's some dude drinking something on a bed. Now, of course, Socrates is drinking hemlock. He's about to kill himself, based on, lots of exciting things that were happening at the time in Athens. And I think that there's one depiction of that, which is currently in the Met Museum, that really resonates, I think, with people more than those other depictions. So I would argue that is better art. Now, if I was an artist, I might say, well, I don't really care what you think. I just want people to feel stuff, and I buy that. But I just think that artists should have an intent, and the more people that experience that intent, I think means good art. But I'm definitely going to get beaten up for that.
No, I think that's fine. I think the discussion about defining art should always have a range of answers like that. So I appreciate that, and I agree with you to a lot of extent too. I think art comes in so many different forms. It could be just one piece that you just blown away by because of the skill and the beauty and the color speaks to you. It's a very personal experience, and some art is because you do know that. Kurt Cobain wrote this song, and he's not with us anymore, and that has a meaning as well, not that just the piece itself. And I guess that's why we call it art at the end of the day. Daniel, there's so many questions I want to ask you, so I want to make sure I can move forward here. While we're in talking about agencies and the creative world that you now find yourself in, what is the purpose of AI really for we talked about how you roll it out and how you kind of talk to all the agencies and everyone trying to roll this concept out in how you can solve problems for your clients in the 7 steps in the supply chain of marketing communication. Is there a way to look at AI to kind of democratize innovation inside WPP? Is there what's the end goal really for AI in the sense? Is it just to enable all the brands and all the agencies to work with more brands and just do more work? I mean, what's the end state really we're looking for? What's the success look like?
A great question, actually. And I always go back to purpose, and WPP's purpose. And one of the reasons why I joined the company was because of that purpose, is to use the power of creativity to make a better future for clients and our planet and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I think a better future is a future where people are economically free to live beyond themselves. We can talk about that later or another day if you want. But what I'd like to think is that marketing is the engine of change, and we have tremendous power in helping organizations either be successful or fail, with a front window between the brand, the goods and the customer. And what I'd like to see happen more is that we help brands not just showcase that their goods are faster, better, cheaper, but that they add value to the human being, that they provide nostalgia and connection and education and even like transhumanism. How do we feel like we are giving back somehow to the world? So I'd like to see purpose shine through our advertising, and I think WPP have the ability to help organizations win through not just showcasing their purpose, but by trying to achieve their purpose. And so for me, if we can help organizations ultimately think about the brands that you consume from or your purpose, if we can help organizations achieve their purpose, accelerate towards their purpose, I believe that it's that collective purpose of enterprise that when you add it all together makes the world a bit better for everybody. So that's what I think the end goal is. The end goal is making goods and services more abundant, more affordable to people, lowering down the cost, making sure that they are then able to feed themselves, able to educate themselves, have access to transport and education, so that they can then use their creativity to be able to make the world a bit better.
I like that. Just making the world better. One thing about what brands. Actually, I had a guest on the show this summer. I mentioned before, Brian Snyder. He's a president over at Axicom. I think you know of him. He spoke very highly of you, and we talked about the future. And he had some really interesting insights into the potential future of brands. Like potentially, we will all use these AI agents to help do our bidding for us. And what that means might be websites become a bit more redundant for looking for information. And we have AI agents to be able to find information right at our fingertips, or even do the shopping for us. What do you think is the future of brands really? And how should marketers look at their own communication and how they get their message out there to people, and also how they maybe inform these AI agents to prefer them? Like, how should brands look about this future when AI is doing so much for consumers to find the right solutions for them?
It's a lovely question. There's a nice Harvard Business Review article. I think back in 2016, it was I think called something like the consumer values pyramid. And what they've done is they identified like 40 things that humans value. And of course, faster, better, cheaper is, the kind of like the lower Maslow run on that ladder, all the way through to, as I mentioned, human connection and education and giving back and all that kind of stuff. And what we are going to be doing over the coming years is we are creating digital twins of ourselves. So now they'll be called assistants or co-pilots or whatever, but those assistants are going to learn about your buying habits, your preferences, your moral leanings, all that kind of stuff. And they will be making decisions for you, purchasing decisions for you. So we as marketers not only need to figure out how do we market to human beings, but how do we market to AIs? And so now I actually think that those AIs will be making relatively commoditized, in some respects, purchasing decisions, what type of toothpaste, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'd like to think is that brands then shift their focus from to actually how do we now provide goods and services that enrich and enhance other values within people, and so how do we make it experiential and all of that good stuff. So I think we need to do both. And what I'd like to think it will elevate our experience in how we engage with brands over the next 5-10 years.
Incredible. Let's talk about the future a little bit, Barbara. We're wrapping up here. We're coming up on time. But you talked about this, the fulfilling purposes for brands and for humans is really what seems to drive you here, which I really love. How do you see AI enhanced kind of creativity being used, not just for artistic purposes and the industry we're in now, but to really solve humanity's biggest challenges? Because there's a lot of debate, obviously, around the disruption around AI and job displacements and the kind of fears of it. It was a big part of the discourse and the narrative in media and discussions. So how do you view this kind of positive outlook, and obviously weighing in the risks that you're dealing with as well?
Well, first of all, I think, at the moment, again, these large language models are very good at answering questions, and soon they'll be smarter. They'll go from a graduate level to a master's level to a PhD level to a professor level. And when you get to kind of PhD professor levels, you can ask them to build algorithms or solve problems that are actually very hard to solve, like distributing goods, etc. So I think that we'll be able to come up with new ways of making organizations more efficient and more effective. And what I hope will happen is that as we do that, I think there's a massive opportunity to reduce the cost of the creation and dissemination of goods. Now, cost sometimes means human labor. But if we get the timing right, as more and more things become abundant and maybe more people become free from those not having paid work, they have everything they need to survive and thrive as a human being. They have access to food, healthcare, education, energy, transport, freeing them to be able to then use their creativity to make the world better. And so the equation that we need to get right over the coming decade or so is how do we make goods more abundant whilst freeing people up to allow them to do the things that they want to be doing and living their true humanity.
And while we're on this subject as well, what are the next levels? I mean, we know now how we use I use ChatGPT to learn that Monet was an impressionist. That's a great middle school knowledge, I guess. How far away are we from artificial general intelligence, and then beyond that, super intelligence? What's your take on that? As a big thought leader in this space, I find it interesting. I remember watching. I think my first interaction with this question was watching Singularity's Near, the documentary, and then reading the book by Ray Kurzweil many years ago, where we're now in 2024, and those time horizons have shifted quite a bit. What is your time horizon on reaching those levels?
I think that most people in my community feel like we could achieve AGI within this decade. So as I mentioned, I think we're going to go from a graduate to a master's level, which is about now. We're going to get in 18 months' time a PhD level, and 18 months' time after that postdoc, and 18 months' time after that we'll have a professor in our pocket. Now, there are two definitions of AI to AGI. One is an AI that can pretty much do everything that a human does, right? To answer crosswords and cut hair and drive cars. The other definition of AGI is something as smart as all of us, not smarter, but as smart as all humans. And the first thing you would do if you built an AGI that's as smart as everybody is you would ask it to go and build an AI smarter than itself. And that's where you then get the fast takeoff, and we could then see super intelligence happen very quickly.
Daniel, I won't hold you more. Thank you so much for coming on. Can I just ask you if there any recommendation of a book, a podcast, a sci-fi movie that you watched recently? Yeah. Any recommendation that you give that's top of mind for you?
I really like the London Futurist podcast. I think they do a really great job in covering the future landscape.
Amazing. We'll check that out. Who do you think I should get next on the show?
Oh, as I said, I've got an empty mind, so I have to stare at a wall. And what I'll do is I'll have a think about that. But I don't know, there's so many amazing people out there. Callum Chase, David Wood are both actually the podcast people on the podcast. Both of them have a breadth of knowledge about the future. And so they're excellent. Let me have a think about it. I'll come back to you.
We'll reach out soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Cheers.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you for watching and listening to Makes You Wonder. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a solid and hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. For extra karma, please share with your mom and your friends too. Makes You Wonder is made with love by Wondercraft, the AI audio studio for brands and creative teams. It's hosted by Oskar Sarander. You can find Oskar on LinkedIn, X, and Threads. Links in show notes. This episode was produced by Alex Hughes Morgan. It was edited by Zaina. A nice young man named Dimitri from Wondercraft was the executive producer. Learn more about Wondercraft at wondercraft.ai.